Hey Year 7s, welcome back. This is exercise 11D on units of area and area of a rectangle, which is on page 637. So like I mentioned last lesson, area and perimeter are actually very, very related. When perimeter is the distance around a 2D shape, the area is the total amount of distance, total amount of space, in a 2D shape. And because they're linked, we use the same kind of information, but we actually have a different answer, of course, because we're looking at different things. So just a reminder for those who forgot, our perimeter is the distance around the grass area. So for example, the distance or the length of the fence, whereas the grass is actually the area that we're looking at, okay? If I look over here, this one over here should look quite familiar. This is the conversion chart for our length, or in other words, perimeter, right? So our conversion chart for our length. And if you look on the right over here, I've got the conversion for area. Now, we won't actually delve into this too much, but it's just a good thing to note that as you can see, everything is squared. Now, it's almost the same. It's almost exactly the same, but the only difference is that we chucked a square on top of everything. So square, just for those of you who forgot, means multiply by itself. So over here, instead of m, I've got m squared. And here, I have cm, I got cm squared. And instead of 10, I've got 10 squared. So that's just something important to know, that we can't just convert using the same conversion chart. But like I said, we're not going to push into that too much. I want to focus on how to find area. So over here, I've got count the number of squares to find the area of the shape drawn on the centimeter grid. Now, I know it's a centimeter grid, which means that each one of these little areas over here, let's say I draw this, there we go, that is 1 centimeter squared. Okay, so that's 1 centimeter squared, and I'm actually looking at how to find or how many squares there are. So I know off the bat there's 1, there's 2, 3, there's 3, there's 4, and there's 5, okay? So that's 5. Now, then they're not perfectly drawn, but that's 5 centimeter squares in our shape, okay? So that's 5. Now, I need to know what is the area of this section over here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a bigger rectangle around here. Okay, as you can see, it's cut perfectly across the middle. Now, normally it would be 2, but in this case, I know that it's 1. Okay, I know that it's 1, which means the answer is 5 plus 1, which gives me an answer of 6 centimeters squared. Okay, so this one's just purely looking at what is the area in terms of how many squares do I fit inside the shape. So that's what happens when you're given a grid, but sometimes you want to try and find it even if there's no grid, because obviously in real life there's not going to be a grid everywhere you go. So the area the area of a rectangle was found by using area equals length times width. Okay, so the L is length, W is width. Now, because we're multiplying it, it doesn't actually matter which one is length, which one is width, as long as you're using the different lengths. So in this case, I've got length times by the width, which gives me the area of the rectangle. Now with the square, it's very interesting because it's actually the same formula, except, well, instead of going length times width, I'm going to say length times by length, or in other words, length squared. Okay, and the reason is because for a square, we know that the length and the width is the same. So in other words, the length, width, or length, same thing. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go straight into an example. So find the area of this rectangle and square. So let's start with the rectangle. Remember that the formula for the area of a rectangle is length times width. I know that length, let's say, is 10 millimeters. I know that width, let's say, is 4 millimeters. Okay, so for area, it's equal to length, which is 10 millimeters, times by W, which is 4 millimeters. And that gives me an answer of 40 millimeters, and that, 40 millimeters squared. Remember, if we're working with area, it needs to have square. So 40 millimeters squared is that answer. Over here, area equals to length squared. I know that length equals to 2.5. So I'm going to say, well, area equals to 2.5 squared, because remember, length squared. So if I've got 2.5 squared, I'm thinking to myself, well, what's 2.5 times 2.5? and we can actually solve that. So 2.5 times by 2.5, 5 times 5 is 25, 5 times 2 is 10, bring down the 2, so I got 125 there. Next line, 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 2 is 4, plus the 1 gives me 5, and I've got 6 to 5. I've got 1, 2 decimal place, so 1, 2 decimal place, and my answer is area equals to 6.25 centimeters squared. Now I went through this part quite quickly, but if you feel like that didn't really make sense, please go back and study multiplying decimals. But that is the idea of what we're working with. Okay? If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, best of luck.